Safe Water Network. We're pleased to be part of today's program and presentation. I think the topic is quite relevant, especially to the work that we do here in Ghana. At Safe Water Network, as you know very well, our mission is to bring safe and affordable water to communities in need in Ghana and elsewhere. We do develop and implement safe water, small water systems using the market-based approach. Approach is self-finance, is financially self-sustaining, repeatable, and affordable. Part of our work also involves demonstrating success at scale. Currently, we're in more than 100 communities as we speak. We're bringing water to more than 300,000 people in those communities, and we're adding additional communities as the months go by. Our target is to reach about 500,000 people within the next 4 or 5 years. We are also advancing the water sector with evidence, tools, and resources. We share our findings with the sector, and as we mentioned earlier, we also try to understand the challenges that are facing the sector and some of the solutions that we can advance to help the sector overcome these. We have issues around financing, operations, market mapping, market segmentation, cost control, and other issues that are facing the sector. In helping to achieve the SDG6 of bringing safe and affordable water closer on premise and closer to the people, these are some of the issues that we grapple with on a daily basis. My colleague, Joe Ampedu-Boakye, is going to go through a presentation showing how our model works, what we've been able to achieve so far, and how we are helping advance the sector and how we're helping the community and the sector achieve the SDG6. I will pause here and wait for questions at the end of our presentation, and then hand you over to my colleague, Joe Ampedu-Boakye. Again, as I said, we're very pleased to be part of today's program and look forward to hearing your comments and questions to help us advance our work. Thank you, and I'll hand you over to Joe.
Thank you very much, Charles. As Charles did explain, my presentation will provide a context around the need or demand for water in Ghana, and I'll try to situate this within the context of the SDGs, working off from the MDGs. I'll also talk about the financing gap the SDG presents and how small water enterprises can contribute to achieving the SDGs. But before I start, I would like us to reflect on what the current need is. And if you are familiar with Ghana's water sector landscape, there is a huge demand for water. An estimated 8.3 million people, or almost 30% of Ghanaians, currently lack access to basic water services. And it cuts across the various geographical landscape. If you look at the rural and peri-urban areas, we are looking at 6.9. In urban areas, we are looking at 1.4 million. Cumulatively, that gives us 8.3 million people who currently lack access. And the consequences are there because then you have a lot of children. Estimate shows that we lose thousands of children to basic diseases such as diarrhea and other diseases that we could have been able to prevent if people had access to clean water. But the reason for this is a funding gap. And that is what leaves many underserved or unserved as we speak. Ghana's water sector strategic development plan estimates that the sector needs an annual funding of $327 million to be able to meet even the SDGs by 2025. Now, current estimates show that we are able to cover only 33% of the funding that is required. That is, if you look at the 2015 funding rates. Obviously, that leaves a huge funding gap. Cumulatively, we are looking at about $2.1 billion to be able to provide water access, basic water access for everyone by 2025. But that is the situation with respect to the MDGs. The SDGs raises the bar much higher, and that requires that you don't just provide water facilities, but you ensure that the service is sustainable and it is safely managed and piped onto beneficiaries or customers within their premises. That obviously means that whatever we are doing now, the bar gets raised a bit more higher. As I said initially, if you look at our landscape, we are serving about 23.4. We have about 8.3 that is yet to be covered, giving us an annual funding gap of $230 million. Now, if you look at the SDGs, the SDG standards of safely managed water access pipe on premises, we are currently able to do that for only 8.5 million people in Ghana. It leaves a huge gap of $23.1 million. And the reason is not far-fetched. We've provided water systems that are unable to deliver safe water access and are also unable to get it piped onto premises. So that is what accounts for this huge gap. And that, of course, immediately triples the funding required to be able to provide safely managed water access for everyone. Our estimates, the sector will need an annual funding of $946 million to be able to achieve the SDGs by 2030. If you look at 2015 funding rates, then that leaves a huge gap of $800+ million that the sector will need to be able to attract funding and meet this need. Now, how does small water enterprises contribute to achieving this particular need? And normally donors or development partners or government agencies would always want to look at two solutions. One is to either give a hand pump or to provide a major water utility. Those water systems are okay, but they come with their own disadvantages. The hand pumps will not give you safe water because we hardly test the quality of these water systems after they've been launched. And experience shows that they've had very high failure rates. Our utilities are also fairly large infrastructure, very time consuming to construct and require ongoing maintenance and are prone to a lot of leaks and contamination, which compromises the safety of the water that is provided. In terms of service reliability too, most often people do not have water access 24/7. And that is the opportunity that small water enterprises can come in and fill that gap. So the current underinvestment creates an opportunity for us to look at small water enterprises in the sense that they are very flexible. So you can size them to meet the demands of a peculiar community, and they are also appropriate for even informal settlements where you cannot provide major utility services. They are locally owned, locally operated, providing jobs for people, getting them actively involved in keeping these water systems running over a longer time. And then we have maintenance built into the operating model. With this particular solution, based on our understanding of the water landscape, it can serve or provide safely managed water access to 3.2 million people as of now. If you look at the rural water landscape, you can potentially deploy small water enterprise solution and provide water access to an additional 1.6 million people. Within the urban landscape, especially in peri-urban areas, you can reach out to as many as 1.4 million people based on the MDG estimates. If you go higher with the SDGs, I will show you how small water enterprises can contribute to taking consumers on the service ladder for them to have safely managed water access on their premises. So what is a small water enterprises? Basically, it involves identifying the water source in the community. It can be a surface or groundwater source, and then setting up a water system, not just a utility where everyone gets to connect, but getting the size to the needs of the community. So the investment then becomes incremental. You can expand on the capacity as the community begins to grow. A local operator is trained to run the water enterprise as a business with clear service benchmarks. And then that requires a one-time investment of an average of $35 per person. So if you compare this with what we have for even our boreholes and major utilities, is a major, we are deploying capital in the most cost-effective manner. And then the water is sold at an affordable rate. We are currently selling water at, on the average, 12 pesos, but generally 10 pesos for 20 liters. And that is enough to provide 20 liters of water to meet the basic needs of our consumers. The revenue pays for the operation cost, technical services, maintenance, because these water systems will require repair and ongoing maintenance. And where feasible, excess revenue is recovered for purposes of reinvestment in the water system. Our small water enterprises are backed by an extensive education and outreach programs to create demand and boost sales so that the stations become financially viable. And as I said, there are opportunities for substations, that is providing water to adjoining communities, for providing bulk delivery services to customers that may be living far away from the water station, and also providing household connections. And that clearly aligns with the SDG of having safely managed water access piped onto premises. And the water is tested on a regular basis. We carry out monthly water quality tests, and the results are displayed on site. Now, this basically is small water enterprises, and we apply a cluster-based approach. So we don't just throw water systems around, but aggregate them within a specific geography so we can deploy a technical support services, what we currently call a field services entity, so that they can make sure that all these stations are providing safe water access. If there's a breakdown, they can repair it and provide ongoing technical assistance for the operators and vendors of these systems. Now, with about 7+ years of implementing small water enterprises, we've been able to expand our footprint into 100 communities. We are providing water access to 300,000 people plus. We are launching water stations every other month. The performance of our water stations compares with most of the major long-term targets or high performance indicators of most water systems. If you look at affordability, our water, the tariffs charged at our water stations are affordable. Our water systems continue to register very low downtimes, 5% or less. The water that is produced meets WHO water quality standards. Stations are recovering their local operating costs, and the break-even time, we estimate that within 8 years, they'll be able to break even. The demonstrated results are what we are beginning to see on your screen. We invested the very early years from 2010 to 2012 in developing the model. We launched a proof of concept phase between 2013 and 2015. We're now at the expansion phase where we want to demonstrate small water enterprises at a credible scale, one that enables easy replication by other partners and not necessarily by Safe Water Network. And then once we've been able to demonstrate at credible scale, we can get other partners to be able to replicate this, either in Ghana or in other geographies. We've modeled our water stations. So what you are seeing is a 5-year projection of our water stations. Our experience shows that our stations need an initial startup to be able to keep them running in the long term. And as I said earlier, we estimate that stations will be able to break even in about 8 years, and therefore require a startup investment capital to keep them running. But we are not satisfied with this. We are continually working to improve the break-even time. And as you look at the projections in the long term, small water enterprises have a potential to generate additional free cash flow of up to about $20,000 per station. This can be accrued over a period of 8 to 25 years. And this can then be applied towards capital recovery, so that it becomes a one-time investment that generates additional revenue for reinvestment in expanding the water system as the community expands. So how are we trying to optimize our model to be able to reduce the time it takes to break even and improve on our station viability? We are implementing solar power, which reduces our operating expenses by cutting out reducing the cost of electricity. And that, of course, makes the station more financially viable. We are introducing water ATMs. It guarantees access 24/7 for our consumers. And that will boost sales, enable us track revenues, and be able to reduce wastages. We are implementing smart meters or prepaid meters, enabling our customers to purchase credits or buy water in advance. That reduces the amount of revenue that we would have lost through long payment of water bills. We are deepening our household connection program. As people get to connect water into their homes, their consumption goes up, and that provides additional revenue for the financial viability of our stations. And we track our stations' performance. So we've introduced a mobile tablet program that enables our officers, our operators to provide real-time data on the performance of our stations. So currently we estimate to break even within 8 years. By introducing solar, that significantly reduces the break-even time to 5 years. And then when you are able to add on the household connection program backed by smart meters, you can potentially reduce the time it requires to break even to 4 years. Currently, funding for small water enterprises is heavily reliant on private foundations. The Hilton Foundation has been a terrific supporter of our work in Ghana. We've been backed by other international development agencies like the Netherlands government, and we've had some funding from local government authorities. But it's generally been 100% grant. Moving into the future, we expect to be able to attract a lot more funding also from local government authorities, because that demonstrates increased ownership of the model. We are also getting a lot of interest from local corporate entities, quasi-government institutions, and also the private sector. And we're currently piloting an initiative where we expect the private sector to also make some capital contribution into setting up small water enterprises. So we expect the funding mix to be diversified because, and this is anchored on the back of an impressive financial performance and proposition of our small water enterprises over time. If this then works through, that obviously provides an opportunity to diversify funding, attract additional capital to be able to meet the funding gap that the sector currently faces. And with that funding mix, we expect that it wouldn't be overly grants. We'll have a diversified portfolio that has some grants and some loans. We estimate that the loans and investments could add up to about 30% of the overall portfolio. To be able to attract this funding, we are developing what is known as the Ghana Water Enterprises Trust. And this initiative is currently being funded by the World Bank PIAF unit. And within the framework of this Ghana Water Enterprises Trust, we want to establish a pool within which we will be able to attract funding from diverse sources, blended funding. We expect that to come from the various sources that are outlined in the past. The trust will provide the governance that is needed, the transparency that is needed for investors and funders, and will generate regular financial and operating reporting on the performance of the water stations. It also provides a mechanism to account for funds as they come in and how they are deployed, and diversifies the risks by pooling small water stations or small water enterprises assets to allow for cross-subsidization or working capital and financial reserves across the portfolio. So we expect that the trust will be able to leverage capital from investors, and this will be used to fund new stations, build additional stations to be able to expand the portfolio, and also to operate and maintain the water stations with clear service level benchmarks that guarantee quality. Now, we expect revenues from the stations to generate maintenance reserves, which will then be applied in keeping these stations running over a longer period of time. Capital that is recovered will be tracked. Some dividends that is generated will be given to local government authorities, who will then apply it into supporting initiatives that improve access to water. Perhaps maybe additional household connections, additional standpipes. Those dividends can be applied to that. And then the profit that is generated can be reinvested into the trust. So it becomes a one-time investment that guarantees that small water enterprises are developed over a longer period of time. This is currently being incubated by Safe Water Network. We've benefited a lot from high-level expertise from the likes of Deloitte and others who are helping us to develop and structure this particular trust. Of course, the trust is supported by a working group that has strong representation from the Ghana government. We have representatives from the Ministry of Water Resources and Finance. Major development partners like the World Bank and the Netherlands government are part of this working group. And then we have civil society represented by CONIWAS and the private sector playing a key role on the working group. And they are backstopping the process in developing the Water Enterprises Trust. Of course, if we have the trust in place with a strong financial proposition, we expect that small water enterprises can be scaled up. But certainly there are barriers, and they cut across the various sections of service delivery, from the enterprise level through the value chain, at the governmental level, and even at the global level. And we've outlined some of these challenges here. But for purposes of this discussion, I think the ones that come across as key priority are around financial management, getting the required technical expertise at the station level to run the water station, getting clear service benchmarks, policy support. All these are major barriers that need to be addressed if SWEs can be scaled up. So how do we scale this up? It is important to develop a technical services platform, one that ensures that we're able to maintain the existing stations well so that they deliver safely managed water access consistent with the SDG targets. We also need to continue to drive the establishment of the Ghana Water Enterprises Plus. That clearly is a major funding mechanism that could generate resources to fund the launch of additional small water enterprises. And certainly there is an opportunity to leverage private sector capital expertise and attract funding to scale up small water enterprises. It requires engaging with partners and working actively with this small water enterprises working group, which as an organization we are committed to doing. And then since we want to ensure quality, there's a need to establish clear service level benchmarks to guide small water enterprises operations. We need to improve mapping of the market. It is not okay to allow Community Water and Sanitation Agency, Ghana Water Company Limited, to just deploy resources wherever it is. If we have this clearly mapped and we know where the market opportunity is, where an enterprise solution would work, it will enable us to deploy capital much more cost effectively. And currently we have a lot of service providers, mainly community level hand pumps where there's virtually no tariffs. So people get free water. It makes it competitive or challenging to apply an enterprise approach. So government has a clear role to play there, making sure that, yes, we provide water that is safe, that guarantees the quality, but we apply a uniform pricing policy, one that guarantees that we're able to cover the cost of delivering the service so where we can provide a much more sustainable service and create an opportunity for the private sector and small water enterprises to come in and meet the additional need or the finding gap within the sector. I think on this note, I will want to end. We are grateful to our numerous partners who have been supporting our work in Ghana, the Hilton Foundation, Stone, the Ghana Netherlands Watch Program, and all our funding partners. They've been a terrific supporter on our work and have been funding development of this model and the potential scaling up, not just in Ghana, but in time, replicating this across the developing world. I think on this note, I would like to end, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. If any of the attendees have questions or points for discussion, now is your time. Just use the questions feature or the chat on the webinar software. I see there is a question from Carolina Music. I will unmute and then you can ask your question in person.
Thank you very much. So my first, thank you so much, Dr. Charles and Joe. This was a great presentation, and congratulations on this very successful model. And my question regards the scaling. So you showed in the presentation that the gap to bridge the SDG6 for Ghana, which is the universal access to water, is humongous. And so my question is much broader. What are the elements, what has to happen for organizations such as Water Network, but others, to do differently to achieve the SDG goal 6 for Ghana? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clearly, what clearly needs to happen is a major segmentation of the market. Government has a role to play in there by clearly mapping out the market, because clearly, currently there is a huge overlap. There isn't a clear demarcation. Sometimes you have the major utility service provider serving some rural communities. Sometimes you also have some communities within the operating framework of the Community Water and Sanitation Agency also getting caught up in Ghana Water Company's operational area. So we clearly need to segment this market well. And that, of course, means that once we're able to clearly map this out, we will realize that there is a segment of the market where no major player really focuses on. And this is particularly more important, especially for peri-urban areas. And in Ghana, we've had a situation where most of these peri-urban areas used to be small communities and were therefore rural. So once we have this clearly mapped out, we realize that some of these communities, we cannot deploy a rural technology. And there, that provides an opportunity to look at small enterprises. And then financing is a major barrier. And that is where government needs to move away from the usual donor grant focused approach towards looking at how to attract capital from diverse sources. And as Safe Water Network, we've demonstrated that that opportunity exists. What it requires is having a financing instrument like the Ghana Water Enterprises, one that has a clearly mapped out governance structure where investors then have confidence in either putting their money in or leveraging investment from the trust to be able to set up and expand water system. And then, of course, there's a major challenge with the lack of technical expertise, especially at the community level. There are some communities you obviously cannot find the right expertise to be able to operate and manage water systems. But if you're able to deploy a cluster-based approach, which is what we're currently doing, you are able to aggregate water stations or water systems within a given geography, be able to pull the revenues together. That becomes a colossal or significant resource that you can then deploy in engaging a higher level of technical expertise like the food service entity that we currently have. So government clearly has a role over there in allowing for an aggregation of these water systems within a given geography, have their revenue pulled together. Then we can deploy the expertise, high-level expertise, to be able to keep all these water systems running on a much more sustainable basis. These are clearly immediate actions that sector leadership government can take up and implement.
Thank you, Joe. And so I have also a follow-up question. And what do you see as a role for the government and effective public policy that would help you to scale this approach?
I think the role for government is very, very critical. Government needs to first of all, it needs to prioritize water access. The sector has largely been driven by donor support, especially in the form of grants. Now, assumed a lower middle, it makes the country unattractive to grant support. So government obviously needs to step up its funding in terms of additional resources, not just providing it in the form of grants, but first of all making the funding available and insisting on the agencies that benefit from this funding to have clear service level benchmarks, one that ensures that capital will be deployed much more effectively. And also, if small water enterprises can be scaled up, certainly some patient. If government can be assured that with a one-time investment, small water enterprises can provide water services that meets quality standards on a sustainable basis, I would recommend that government looks into that option, provide the resources available, and even encourage the private sector to bring funding, expertise, materials, logistics, to leverage these particular funds and be able to set up water systems to be able to meet the current huge gap that we have in water access. And then the other thing that needs to happen is to government to make it clear, and this will require developing a clear policy instrument. And it's something that currently Safe Water Network, we are leading that, of course, with support from DEF. We're working actively with the Ministry of Water Resources, a couple of other development partners and agencies to develop clear guidelines on what it takes for the private sector to participate in water services delivery. And it's one thing that government needs to take keen interest in, because once we're able to do that, it will provide clear step-by-step approach on which the private sector can apply to be able to work in partnership with government in order to develop a basic social service like water. And the opportunity exists. All that is needed is to have these guidelines, these documents, these agreements clearly laid out so that the private sector will have increased confidence in it and be able to apply their capital.
Joe?
Yes.
This is Charles. Let me add a few thoughts to this, because I think this is very important. if you look at the presentation, you can see the huge funding gap that we have in the sector. Government can do its bit, but I think the private sector also has a role to play, attracting private financing to the sector. How do we make the sector attractive for private financing? And I think that is where government can play a key role. Joe talked about segmenting the market. Private entrepreneurs, if you would like to have a clear view of which areas have been segmented for small water enterprises and which areas have been segmented for other types of interventions. I think once we have that, then it makes it easier to attract private financing. These things will have to happen at the policy level. And that is one area where Safe Water Network is spending a lot of resources to help define and help influence the policy direction so government can play the right role to bring water to the sector, to the underserved segment. As you saw in the presentation, the funding gap is huge, and small water enterprises have a role to play. The trust that Joe talked about, the Water Enterprise Trust, one of its critical objectives is to attract diverse sources of funding. We believe that's what the segment needs, and we believe that there's a role for government in this in terms of policy direction and segmentation. And of course, if the returns are attractive, I think the private sector will play a key role. So government has to take the leadership in that front and to make whatever organizations like us are trying to do quite attractive and successful.
Thank you very much. We also have a question from Tsifa Akulor. I will unmute you and then you can ask your question in person. We seem to have a small technical problem. It will be rectified in a second.
Tsifa, can you please unmute yourself?
Why don't you just read the question?
Okay, apparently the microphone doesn't seem to be working. So her question was, what is the current strategy for engaging various stakeholders to streamline the upscaling process? And also, what is the consideration of climate change in achieving your goals?
Okay, thank you very much. In terms of engagement with other partners, we've created a platform where we continuously share progress on the work, progress on our full implementation with the sector. So on an annual basis, we convene what is known as the annual Beyond the Pipe, and it attracts close to 100 sector leaders from government, development partners, from academia, civil society organizations, including NGOs. And there we share our full experiences, some of the lessons we are learning, the challenges, the successes, so that the model does not just become just our approach, but something that we are working actively with the sector, so that enables easier replication. And then we also we generate what we call field insights. These materials are available on our website. Anytime we try an initiative on the field, we document our experiences and make this available for other partners to take a look at. And as an organization, we are an active member of CONIWAS. CONIWAS is a platform for other NGOs in the water sector. We participate in their annual MOLE conference, and we work actively with several partners. And in country, we work a lot with in-country NGOs, other NGOs like World Vision, like IRC. They are partners, and we are actively working with them on a number of our field implementation programs. And we are convinced that by doing this actively with them, we are able to also learn from their experiences, be able to share our own experience with them, and that enables easier application or replication of our model. In terms of how climate change features in our work, I talked about a community dividend being applied in water supply initiatives. We model our our financials to allow for some of the revenue to be set outside to be able to protect the water resources from which these water stations operate. So for each water station, there is community level elected water and sanitation management teams. And we train them, we assist them to develop water safety plans, water resource management plans. And in there, they have clear strategies. Sometimes it involves planting of trees, preventing people from fishing close to where we have the major water intake points are. We encourage the communities to come up with a number of locally driven, locally led initiatives that can be implemented to protect the water sources so that we can guarantee that we can preserve the water source both for the use of the current and the future generations. So that is how climate change issues are factored into our work. And of course, our water stations secure permits. We secure permits from the Water Resources Commission. We also complete the required, they are backed by environmental impact assessments, and these are done and the reports are lodged with the Environmental Protection Agency so that they are convinced that our water stations do not have a major effect on the environment. So that is how climate change issues are addressed as part of our work.
We also have a question from Sana Rahim. So Sana, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. I guess my question was in terms of scaling the model that you've used, do you have any best practices or kind of lesson learned in how you develop the partnerships with government? Because I think that's actually kind of a big achievement that you've developed these relationships. So do you have any recommendations for others who are in a similar boat with their enterprise and trying to get started?
Thank you very much. I think in terms of scaling up, one major area we've been quite successful is partnership with government. And as I did indicate in my presentation, we've had them playing a key role on our small water enterprises group. So that, for instance, the Ghana Water Enterprises Trust, which we're currently developing, and a public-private partnership pilot project all get the active engagement and involvement of government right from the start. So we involve government both in developing the concept note and in developing these instruments. But if there's any major success we've made, it's more with collaborating with local government authorities. We've had a tremendous support from local government authorities in our model. And what is driving this success is more with the evidence on the results on the ground. Most of these local government authorities have had experiences where they've invested in water systems that have failed or have not been able to deliver the required water services. Most of these water systems break down, and the communities come back to the local government authorities to assist them with repair and ongoing maintenance. So we've had some who have looked at our model and realized that if they invest in our water stations, it's something that guarantees that there will be reliable, safe water access. And whenever there's a breakdown, there will be a technical expertise on the field that can be deployed to fix the problem and keep it running on a long-term basis. So increasingly, we are getting them giving us a lot of endorsements and going beyond the endorsement to even committing resources from their internally generated funds and other external support agency funding into setting up of small water enterprises. And for us, that is one major lesson we will want to continue to develop and get other partners to play. So we've rolled out a program currently where we are actively engaging with local government authorities, especially within the areas where we currently have our footprint, because there they get to see the evidence, and we are getting some positive feedback from them, strong willingness to not just to provide leadership, but to co-invest with us in replicating or expanding small water enterprises.
Thank you very much, Joe. This was very good. And I have a question. Sustainable development goals have this imperative of leaving no one behind. But we know that markets, even though they're inclusive, sometimes they leave some people outside. So what do you think should be the approach of the government and your partners in Ghana to ensure that by 2030, actually, indeed, all the consumers in Ghana have access to water, even though that are mostly left behind? So my question is essentially to ask you, do you understand who are those at risk of being left behind today?
Thank you very much. I think as a sector, we're gradually making progress in first being able to deepen our understanding of the market landscape so that we know those, the various segments of the market, the ones we are currently able to reach, the ones we are unable to reach, not just because they don't have a service, but they are unable to afford the service that is being provided. And clearly government has a leadership role to play in this. I am convinced government has currently set up a motion initiative that will develop a strong information or management information system that will enable government clearly map out all the various water service provided, the various consumers, understanding their income levels, patronage of water, demand for water, and all that. If that information is available, it will be extremely helpful, not just for small water enterprises, but also the existing service providers that we'll have, because then that will clearly segment the market and they will know those who have the service and are able to afford it and those who have it but are unable to afford it. But as an organization, we are convinced that we need to make water, first of all, affordable to people who need the service. We recognize that the service comes at a cost. So some of the basic costs needs to be covered if you want to provide this service throughout the year-round, reliable, safe water access. Some of the initiatives that we can do to be able to ensure access for the poor in order not to get them left behind is to be able to adequately target them. So as an organization, one of the initiatives we currently piloting is the use of the water ATMs. Now, by deploying these water ATMs, we're able to interact more directly with our consumers, and we're able to get community level or consumer level data. We'll then be able to profile all our customers and know customers that are clearly unable or cannot afford the water services. If that information is available, we can be able to leverage additional funding and provide some targeted subsidies to those segments of the market so that through a cash transfer program, for instance, with the current LEAP program, Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program that the government is implementing. It's a social safety net program that provides cash transfers to the poor. We could leverage that platform and make a case to government to provide funding for us to provide direct cash transfers to individuals that are within the extreme poverty or within the poverty bracket, so that they can get these cash transfers directly and be able to access water services. It's clearly one initiative that government can partner with us to be able to first of all demonstrate it and then roll it out on a much more bigger scale. But I think for a long-term solution, we need to strengthen our management information systems, be able to clearly understand the market, know where we are currently covering, the ones that clearly lack the access, and how some of these targeted subsidies can be deployed to provide water access. If we're able to do that, then we are certain that we are not leaving anyone behind.
I'm seeing that we also have a few questions from Pearl Dacker and the Deputy Director of the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources. So Pearl, if you unmute your microphone, you're free to ask.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I hope you are hearing me. Mr. Mpedu, good work done. Quite innovative model. But my concern here has to do with how effective are you collaborating with CWSA, the agency in charge of community water provision in our rural communities. My concern has to do with their intention to go the same way Safe Water Network is going. Because data shows that about 30% of CWSA facilities, boreholes and small water systems are not functioning. So I want to find out how you are collaborating with them so that they can be a technology transfer, so that this innovative idea is mainstream into the water sector and the provision of water to our rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We work actively with CWSA in our programming. In fact, CWSA played an active role working with us when we're developing this model and even in implementation to this. So they are a key supporter of our work. They are represented on our Small Water Enterprises Working Group. We continuously engage with them, even as we identify communities and districts where we want to set up small water enterprises. As much as possible, we want to deploy capital in the most cost-effective way. So we try as much as possible to liaise with CWSA to find out if there isn't an existing or an upcoming government program that might be invested in the same community so that we are able to provide water to those who really need the service. So CWSA has been collaborating with us, and we look forward to working actively with them. Going forward, and I am happy that CWSA wants to, I don't know whether I should say adopt aspects of our model, but wants to apply similar processes in the way they deliver water services. We are convinced they are a potential scale partner. They already have a lot of experience in setting up water systems and when working with communities. And we are happy to work with them to be able to scale up this particular initiatives. And we'll be sharing our experiences with them. And if there is any additional support that they will need to be able to implement aspects of our model, set up additional small water enterprises, we are happy as an organization to collaborate with them.
I think this is Charles here. I'd like to add to what Joe said about collaborating with CWSA. We've worked with CWSA over the years. We've adopted their training methods, the pricing model, and a few other parts of our model. We continue to work with them, and actually senior management team members of CWSA do serve on some of our working groups or have served on some of our working groups in the past. As far as working with them in the future, I mean, our model calls for sharing our experiences with the sector and replicating it with other players in the sector. We believe that CWSA can be a major scale partner and can help us achieve the mission that we have set for ourselves, bringing water to the underserved communities.
Okay, I see that we have no more questions for now, so I would like to thank everyone for their time, and I would like to thank especially our wonderful speakers for this very interesting presentation. Follow the SDG Philanthropy platform on social media to find out about future webinars, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.
Hello? Yeah, I think I got disconnected. But in summary, what I was saying is that we welcome CWSA's increased participation in the provision of water to the rural sector. We've worked with them closely in the past, and we look forward to working with them in the future. We've had senior members of CWSA's management team, work with us, review some of our work, sit on some of our working committees, and in other aspects of our work. So we look forward to working with them and collaborating with them in the future.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good time to close the webinar. Thank you to our wonderful speakers, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.